All right, the first cut today. President Bola Tinubu Wednesday called for reforms at the United Nations to give Africa permanent representation on the Security Council. Speaking at the plenary session on peace and stability during the ninth Tokyo International Conference on African Development TICAD 9 in Yokohama, Japan, Tinubu argued that Africa deserved two permanent seats with full privileges.
Well, I totally agree with what the president said. The UN cannot claim to be a democratic institution when the highest decision making body, the UN Security Council, has excluded certain persons. Africa has more than 1 billion people. So we deserve a voice, we deserve a seat at the UN Security Council, for if not for any other thing, for the sake of equity. Not a situation whereby other regions of the world will come up with plans, come up with their own agenda, things that will favor them and push it down the throats of others. If we have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council, Africans can afford to state things the way it affects Africans, not other people pushing an agenda claiming it's African. There's nothing like homegrown decision. If we have a representative, at least, we can afford to tell our stories, we can afford to tell where it pinches us, we can afford to come up with solutions to our own problems. So I totally align with what President Bola Tinubu said, but it remains to be seen if the other parts of the world would understand the need. Not in 2025, how many decades since the UN was created, the United Nations, that Africa indeed needs a voice at the UN Security Council.
The late president of Zimbabwe, his name now very popular,
Mugabe.
Robert Mugabe, the old man that he was, even in his dying days with the little strength he had, was voicing the fact, and directly to the faces of those that thought were the stronger beings in the United Nations that Africa deserved more permanent seats. There was a time that Nigeria and South Africa was being touted, or were being touted, as going to be admitted. But that has not been the case. And for Africa to have that, permanent seat, I think Africa itself has to be united via the Africa Union. It started as Organization of African Unity. But let's tell ourselves the truth. How united is Africa? The same West has been able to divide Africa like rice and beans, akara, moi moi. And so you have Francophone Africa, you have Spanish Africa, you have Anglophone, you have Portuguese, and all that. And so we are not seeing ourselves as one, even from home. There was a time Fela Anikulapo Kuti, God bless his soul, sang a song and he talked about how disunited the United Nations was. And he also lampooned as at that time, the Organization of African Unity. Now, this is a conference that is being held in Tokyo on African development. And it is held in Asia, in Japan. Why are we not having that? There was a time when President Obasanjo was president of Nigeria. There was this thing called NEPAD or NEPAD, New Partnership for Africa's Development. And I recall that NEPAD was coming strong. Part of their portfolio was peer review. If one country is doing something that is very good, why don't you tap into it and do it yourself? NEPAD, as far as I'm concerned, felt like a pack of cards after the Obasanjos of this world and his likes left power. If Africa is not united, there is no amount of grammar we speak. This is not even the summit. If it were at the summit of the United Nations, one would say, okay, our president is saying something. Now, talking about permanent seat in the United Nations, let's bring it back home. Successive regimes in this country, up till this one that we have, do we have regions that are represented in the National Security Council? As we speak today, if you go to the National Security Council in Nigeria, only two languages may just be spoken. You may hear Hausa, you may hear Yoruba, you won't hear Igbo, and you won't hear Idoma, you won't hear Ishekiri, you won't hear Efik. And I shudder when people think, what you cannot do at home, you want it done for you outside. We want a situation where we have fair and equal representation, even back home in the National Security Council, before we talk about going outside to the United Nations, where the nations are actually not united. We have factions. We have allies that do not believe in the United Nations, like NATO and the rest of them, and we have other blocs around the world. So I think we need to come back home as Africans, since Africans will have to take their matter to Asia first, Japan to be precise this time, and this is the 9th one, before they talk about their matters. For me, the statement is just like writing a story. If we can't do it back home, let's not think of doing it outside.
Well, you have raised a valid point. The truth is, it is not enough to make these demands. If you take a look at countries that populate the UN Security Council, they have something in common. There's no African country that comes close in terms of development to the nations that occupy the UN Security Council. So, first off, we need our leaders to develop Africa. If Africa is developed the way it ought to be, we will command respect, not beg for respect. We will command reverence, not beg for one. But due to the level of development in Africa, you could imagine Japan summoning African leaders, and all African leaders would be on cue, smiling for pictures, shaking hands, and what have you. The other time it was in China, tomorrow it will be in Brazil. When shall our leaders, or when would our leaders develop Africa to the point that other countries of the world would be queuing up to come here for one conference or the other? We have the resources. Japan doesn't have oil. We have crude oil. Is it iron ore? Is it cement? Just name it. Japan produces one of the best tires in the world, but they don't have a rubber plantation here. We can grow that here. So our leaders should realize that the only way Africa can command respect in the world today is if they develop Africa. Enough of the talking. The only thing countries like Japan will do for you is they will give you handouts. The question is, for how long shall they continue giving you these handouts? And of course, these handouts are not free. They come with certain conditions. If they give you ₦1, they tell you this is how, this is where. There are certain conditions that come with this that benefit their economy to the detriment of our own economy here.
Well, if we don't know, Professor Patrice Lumumba of Kenya is saying it, and he has said it time and time again, that the Europeans were here, the Americans were here, the Japanese were here, the Lebanese are even here, the Indians. Now China is taking over Africa. Look at what is happening in our solid mining sector. China is taking it not only in other parts of Africa, but in Nigeria as well, illegally too, and in cohort with prominent Nigerians. It was an Adams Oshomole who said that generals were involved on the floor of the Senate. So I can say it clearly here.
That's right, exporting gold.
Exporting gold. Zamfara, why do we have problem there? At least we know the origin. Oshun, we are told, is sitting on gold, but maybe when Zamfara is finished, they will go to Oshun. The fact is that if you're looking for fair play and justice, fair demand and justice, if you are looking for equity, start from home. Nigeria was, on a good pedestal back in the day. We don't want to mention military government because if you do, it's an aberration. But there were times when we had a mission and we had a vision. Since 1999, I must tell you, and even the experiment between 1979 and 1983 showed that we were not ready. You understand where I'm coming from? Can we now deliberately sit down as Africans and break it down to our different countries? Begin to fine tune things. We go to beg for money as loans, and we keep borrowing without using the monies for production. And guess what? We also beg for debt forgiveness. So when you are going cap in hand, and they are the ones, how can they grant it to you?
So,
I think that is the basic thing we have to look at. Even where we have a policy that is supposed to make good things for Nigerians, at the end of the day, it is whitewashed. We have the issue of the subsidy removal, and we thought that 2 years plus, by now things would have been better. But it's getting worse by the day. So Africa, we are not ready. If we are ready, those that some people call leaders, and I call them rulers, should think otherwise.